Kip, what's up, man? It's good to see you. It's been what, 2 or 3 weeks? Because I had Sean on, I think last week, and
And then
maybe
Sean and
we did
I
it the
ran.
yeah. Who
Yeah.
knows? It's all kind of
Yeah.
blending together at this point. But hey, look, I mean, I think there's value. One thing I've seen a lot of guys do is they live in this lone wolf mentality mindset where like, or the other one is this arrogance mindset where like, if I want it done right, I got to do it myself.
Yeah.
And I actually, I appreciate it because you're invested in what you're doing and it's important to you. But then you're hindering yourself. There might actually be somebody who can do it just as good, if not better than you. And even if they can't, why would you limit other people that you want to serve from opportunities to serve, to improve, to get better? So
Totally.
I love the fact that you're here as my host, that we have guys like Drew, guys like Sean, other people that message me and are interested in doing it. I want to give those opportunities to do it because that
totally.
means that they're excited about it. And it means that there's an opportunity to grow for them and me to back out and let other people handle some stuff now and again.
Yeah. I'm sure with Drew doing that one app, you got flooded. You're like, oh, hey, everyone else is like, hey, Brian, I'm down too, bro.
All the time. It's hard. It's increasingly hard when people reach out. And I'm just trying to be really frank and give those who are listening a glimpse into this world of being semi publicly successful. People reach out all the time, and 99% of the intentions are good. But when you hear things so many times, like you have 100 people who are like, well, I want to host a podcast. It's like, okay, I can't do that. Or if you have 100 people or 1,000 people say, hey, you got a fake follower. It's like, I know I have a fake account. I know. Or if a bunch of people reach out and they're like, hey, you used the wrong version of your. It's like, oh, I know you're trying to be helpful. It's just let it go. Like, just let it go. Because when you get 1,000 responses, again, it's like a weird place to be because everybody's trying to be helpful. But when you hear it 1,000 times, it just gets old. It really does. But there's a lesson also too. If you want to connect with people, be different. Be different.
Explain.
Be unique. Well, if you reach out to me and you say to me, hey, Ryan, I really like what you're doing. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that's nice. It's a nice gesture. I usually give them a thumbs up or a fist bump emoji or whatever. But if on the other hand, you reached out and you said, hey, Ryan, I wrote this. I'm not going to say that because I know that's going to unleash. Hey, Ryan, I have this connection to so-and-so. Actually, one guy messaged me. It's a guy that I've been wanting to have on the podcast. And he knew that because he listened to the podcast enough. And he said, hey, I know you've been trying to get this guy on the podcast. I actually have a connection with him. Can I send you an email? Bingo. Different, unique, value-driven. That's a guy I'm going to respond to. Right? So think about that when you're reaching not out to me. I'm a nobody. But when you're reaching out to people that you really want to be connected with, if you do it like everybody else, you're going to get either ghosted, ignored, or the same generic manufactured response that somebody else does. But this is also true, not just in this space we're talking about, but with your boss. Hey, boss, I'd really like a promotion. Well, how many people do you think have said that? Yeah. Everybody that works for him has said that. Or if you go to a client and you're like, well, I really like your business because of X, Y, and Z. That's what everybody says. Or one of the things you often talk about, Kip, is unique selling propositions. If you say, well, my unique selling proposition is I care about people. Well, welcome to the party.
Yeah, I haven't heard
we
that
all
one
care
before.
about people. Yeah. Like, give me something different. How do you do that? The first thing you do is you listen for what other people are saying. Right? If I know that 100 people have said, hey, I'm different because I care about people, I can't say that. Like, I have to just nix that from my vocabulary. And a lot of guys are email me and message me and they're like, hey, Ryan, I'm thinking about starting something like you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm like, bro, that sounds exactly identical to what I created. And it's fine. Like, there's enough space for us, but I promise you, I will mop the floor with you. I promise you. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm just saying I'm better at this than you. And I will snag up that market space faster than you can imagine, because we're better at it, because I've been doing it for 7 years. Yeah. But if you make something different and unique, something the world has never seen before, and it's uniquely you, man, you're off to the races. So just be different.
Yeah. You know, something you said earlier, I didn't want to glaze over it, because we're talking about what I'm paraphrasing is delegating, right? And the value of you being able to have me and Drew and Sean, you know, in a corner. One, you mentioned the ability to create an opportunity for us, right? The other part was they might be able to do it better. Where I get hung up on this is I think different is better, right? I think my version of it is actually better, when in reality it's just different. So if I delegate something to someone else, they'll do it differently, and I get hung up that it's not the way I would do it, and thus it's not a superior product. When in reality, that's not true. It's just different, and it has its own values in a different way, and maybe some negatives in a different way that I wouldn't have seen. But I get hung up on my version always being the right version.
Occasionally, and it's just occasionally, it's not very much, so don't let this blow your head up here. I'll get somebody that says, I really like Kip's insights. Just occasionally, Kip, not too much.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. They're all messaging me, letting me know. And it's exhausting after thousands of messages. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to be popular. I really struggle. I can relate to you, Ryan.
I'm done, man. I'm done. I'm out. You win. You win the podcast today.
Oh, the popularity is so hard to deal with. Oh, woe is me.
I can't. I'm done. I'm out. Just call Sean. You win. There's no rebuttal to that.
To be liked by so many.
I'm literally bitching about people messaging me. Okay, you put me in my place. All right, you win.
No. Please proceed to talk about how great my perspective is first, at least before we end.
Okay, I'll start that, and then you can just run it on your own. People will say, well, I really like Kip's insight. And what is my natural response? Like, what is a man's natural response? Well, what about mine? Well, you like Kip? What about? And you know what? Awesome. You like Kip's feedback because, to your point, it's different. It's something I just couldn't give. Like, I can't give your perspective on the questions that we answer, because I'm not you, and I don't have your experiences, and I don't have 100% of your same beliefs or your culture or whatever. And we shouldn't be threatened by that. I should actually feel good about that. Oh, well, yeah, because I brought Kip in, because I actually acknowledge that too. I knew that you'd be different enough. And that's why I wanted him here on the podcast. I knew Sean had some perspective and was intelligent and successful. And so I brought him on, and I'm not intimidated or threatened by the fact that people really resonate with you and Sean. I'm actually really grateful that I have guys like you in my corner, that you believe in supporting what we're doing.
How do you get into that mindset though? Right. Because that's like because I'm the same way. Like, that's so easy to immediately feel undervalued, or whatever that is, right? To have the ego come into play and go, fuck that, and get pissed off. Like, is it just pausing in the moment and going, wait a second, no, bigger purpose? Or I don't know, what does that look like for you to kind of put that in check?
Maybe a little pause, a little self-reflection. To your point, I would say it goes deeper than that. I would say that you have to be successful. You just have to. Like, I can only be proud enough of people to the degree that I believe in myself.
Yeah, it's self-confidence,
which
focus.
Which is a result of success in different ventures. So I'm a successful podcaster by any objective metric. I'm a successful podcaster. So you coming on my podcast doesn't threaten me.
Right. Because you've gotten great at it. Yeah.
It's just not a threat. I'm not concerned about it. Joe Rogan. I'm not concerned that Joe Rogan is as successful as he is, because I'm a successful podcaster. I'm not, maybe a little bit more on my level. Yeah. As far as downloads, reach, that sort of thing. Jordan Harbinger, a good friend of mine. Brett McKay with The Art of Manliness, Larry Hagner, Good Dad Project. These are all guys that I think were peers as far as some of these objective metrics. I'm not intimidated by Larry. I'm not intimidated by Jordan. I'm not intimidated by Brett because I'm confident enough in my own abilities. Now, I look to those guys and I see what they're doing and I'm like, oh, that's a cool guest. Or Brett has some great guests on. Brett runs a completely different podcast than I do. He's very structured, very self-help, where I think ours is more conversational. Jordan Harbinger brings on some elite level people that I don't even have access to. And he's very thoughtful. He's very intelligent. Joe Rogan is an incredible conversationalist and he has access to some of the most incredible people. That doesn't threaten me because I'm pretty sure about where I am and I know the trajectory I'm on.
Yeah.
If I looked at let's talk about it in a different vein. If I looked at somebody who was ultra, let's say I wanted to get good at jujitsu and I looked at you, who's a jujitsu black belt. And I'm like, well, Kib, he's not really that good because look at his body type and, look at this and look at that. And I don't have that. Yeah, because you're not even in the arena. Now, Kib, I'm not threatened by you at all. I've been training for a little over 3 years. I'm actually inspired by you. I actually look at you and say, hey, here's what he's done. He's not an ultra amazing specimen of a human being. Like he's healthy, he's fit, he's trained, he's got this game that he's developed. And so that's cool. But I can't feel that way unless I'm actively on the path myself.
Got it.
Or unless there's a little bit of a fracture in the path. So let's say, let me give you an example I hear from with a lot of guys. So let's say I'm looking at you with regards to your health or your jiu-jitsu game. And I really want to be confident in myself, but I really have a hard time with alcohol. Like I'm an alcoholic. I can't get over it. I can't figure it out. Yeah. That's but everything else I'm doing right. I'm engaged with my family. I'm eating correctly, except for the alcohol. I'm fit. I'm training. I'm doing all this thing. That's a fracture in my game. And that fracture, more often than not, is going to manifest itself in projection, not internalization. So I'm less likely to say, I can't have what Kip has because I'm an alcoholic. And I'm more likely to say, well, if Kip didn't have these challenges, and if Kip this and Kip that, and I project it all onto you, then he wouldn't be as good as me. So instead, what we do as men is we tend to pull people down rather than say, oh, this is a fracture in my game and I need to replace that with something that's more positive so I can lift myself up.
I really love this. Let me see if I can say it a different way and see if you agree. Fracture, I'm seen as a sense of being out of integrity. And when we're out of integrity, we do two things. We own it and we pivot, or we excuse it to justify it, to live with ourselves. And so what I'm hearing is that projecting of bringing other people down is the justification of my action because I'm out of integrity, because I'm showing up in a way that I know I shouldn't be. And I don't want to change. Thus, I have to run the story, right? I have to come up with some bullshit excuse to justify the behavior.
And it might not even be bullshit. It might actually be a real thing. So I'm dealing with this right now. And I'm not going to lie that this is dealing with my self-confidence, struggling with my self-confidence because of this. Yeah. This is an external circumstance. Now there's things I can do internally to make sure I'm doing it correctly. But this little minor injury that I'm dealing with is a external circumstance that I personally created. I'm not denying that. I created the circumstance. Yeah. And it's impacting my self-confidence. So you're 100% right. And I like, this is the proper use, by the way, Kip, you need to understand this. You need to learn that. Here's a lesson you can learn. Okay. This is the proper use of the word vulnerability.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. We totally blew up I told those guys to blow up your Instagram. I'm like, all right, we're leaving the Utah meetup. I want to see hashtag be vulnerable, be safe, and tag Ryan. It'll be great.
This is the proper use of the word. So let's say you hurt your leg and you go to the doctor and you get an x-ray and there's a little minor fracture in your fibia. or your humerus, fibia, and tibula, right? Are those leg or arm? You guys will know. Okay, let humerus. I know your humerus is your
leg bone. Yeah, I'm
so
from Elsinore, Utah. Leg bone.
So yeah, I'm from Parowan, so we're not all that different. So let's say you get an X-ray. There's a minor little hairline fracture in your humerus. That's a vulnerable spot. It's weak, right? So we have a couple of choices. We ignore it. We could ignore it. And then what happens? It makes it worse.
Yeah.
We could acknowledge it and take a step back and say, I'm going to let that heal. Let me just take a step back. Let me focus on some other elements of my life and let this heal and do its thing. Another alternative is we could say, hey, I actually need a cast on that, because not only do I want it to heal, like I want it to heal properly, straight. And so I'm willing to completely take a step back for a minute and really let it do its thing. But we aren't willing to do that as men. And even me, even in this sling now, I'm like, my wife's like, you need to have that on. Even the lady at the gas station, I go to the convenience store occasionally down the road. Funny lady. She's a neighbor. Her name's Jill. And she's like, where's your sling? Where's your sling, Ryan? I'm like, Jill, I got my wife nagging me about the sling. I don't need you doing it too. And she just laughs, so you got to deliberately and intentionally take a step back occasionally so that you can get better. But also I can focus on other avenues of my game. I can focus on nutrition. I can focus on mobility. I can be a little bit more thoughtful in the way that I approach things, or I could watch and observe, see some things that I've never seen before. Like I fully plan on going to jiu-jitsu tonight. I'm not going to train, but I'll have my gym clothes on. I'll be ready to train. Not that I'm going to, but I'm going to be there to be available and to learn and grow and be in the presence of and get better in a way that I haven't been able to do before. So that is the proper use of the word vulnerability. And it's not vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability. Nobody wants to be weak. And if you do, then you're a loser, and there's no other way to say it. There are people who want to be weak. They're called victims, perpetual victims.
Yeah.
Not victimhood mentality.
I mean, if you use the fractured bone as an example, those individuals are seeking, hey, Ryan, look how bad my life is. Look, I got this fracture, man. And it's like, oh yeah, you know what? It's okay. It totally makes sense why your life's falling apart. Yeah. Yeah. It's, you poor thing.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for. Yeah. Not to address it.
I'm not here to tell you vulnerabilities don't exist. They do. But this whole woke nonsense of let's be vulnerable for the sake of vulnerability is stupid. Like, who's going to have a fractured humerus just so they could say they have a fractured humerus? Like, that's stupid. Instead, okay, you have a fractured bone. Now, how do you fix it? That's the only proper use of vulnerability. I'm weak in this department, which is the definition of vulnerability. And therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z. And then we get better because of it.
I love it. Yeah, I'll stop. I was just thinking that there's another aspect of kind of what we're talking about. Like my takeaway from this is if my ego's getting in the way often, and I almost have a scarcity mentality, I need to build up my confidence. That's I need to focus on, hey, you know what? Confidence needs to be increased. How am I showing up? What am I doing about it?
So there's a question that begs answering in that statement. How do you know if your ego is getting in the way?
For me, it's an emotional state, right? Like it's not a logical thing. So if I were training jujitsu, and I was thinking about this the other way, it's like, let's say you're a blue belt right now, correct? And the chances of you training with the lower belt and that lower belt catching you and you not making that mean something is very low, right? Yeah. You get pissed off, right? But I think as we get better in our jiu-jitsu, that tap doesn't mean as much because we have confidence in it, right? We're like, hey, like I know what I'm doing. I'm working this game. Like, I'm not going to make that mean something about me emotionally and kind of get all emotionally wrapped up into it. So I think whenever I get emotionally wrapped up into it, that's ego.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I agree.
Is that the same for you?
Okay. I agree. I'm not in tune as much as that, where sometimes when I'm emotionally vested in something, let's say my wife and I are arguing about something and I get emotionally bothered or pissed off. Initially, I'm like, well, that's because I'm right and she's wrong.
I love it.
But that's also ego driven, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So
Totally.
for me, here's how you know your ego's in the way: when you're not producing the results you want. It's always, guys, for us, it's always ego driven. Always. If you are not making the kind of money you want, it's because you're arrogant. You don't ask for help. You don't look for opportunities. You're not a team player. You think you have it all figured out. The reason you're not making the money that you want, or at least on the path to, I realize it takes time.
Yeah.
But the reason you're not making the money you want is because you're arrogant. The reason you don't have the deep, meaningful connection with your wife is because you're arrogant. You think you know. You think you're right. You think she needs to serve you. You think that she just needs to do everything that you say. And if that was the case, then everything would be fine. If she would just listen and do what she's told. That's arrogance.
Yeah.
If you're not as fit as you would like to be, it's because you think you can eat all the bullshit and never work out because, I don't know, you're God's gift to women and you're some sort of like Greek god or something.
And you don't need to be
arrogant. Yeah. You're an arrogant sack of shit, and you need to realize that you're a human being. And if you eat like garbage and you don't ever move, then you're not going to have the health and the results that you're after. To me, ego is always a manifestation, or I should say it this way. How would I say it? Let me think about this for a second. If you're not producing what you want in life, it's always a result of arrogance and ego. I cannot think of a time in my life. I will give some caveats here. There are things that other people will do to you. They'll manipulate, they'll lie, they'll steal, they'll cheat, they'll
create roadblocks for you.
Yes. Yeah. That are temporary setbacks, and those are beyond your control, but also you should be aware of those. But the overwhelming majority of things in your life that you're not experiencing are a result of your own arrogance and ego.
Love it. I'm just trying to work this out to see if it works out. And as I think through this, it's like ego would prevent me from being humble enough to learn and listen. You know, from a jiu-jitsu perspective, you may never even show up to the gym because you don't want to be found out to be so crappy, right? Or you won't try the new move. Why? Because
you don't want to get tapped.
That guy might tap me, so I'm never going to try it, right? I'm always like competition mode, got to win in the moment. And then I'm acting out of emotion instead of clarity of mind because I'm angry or whatever, because
Kip, this was
a guy's rolling hard with me.
This was an ego created problem. I had Brian Littlefield, a very, very technical black belt. Have you rolled with Brian at all ever?
You know, I haven't. Out of all, you've done
some training, some classes and courses with him.
For sure.
Very, very high level technical black belt. He was in my side control, and I tried to sweep him from side control, and he didn't respond the way that I wanted him to respond because he's a highly technical black belt. And there was some cues that I missed personally. And here's the interesting thing. I did it and I laughed and I'm like, bro, you're supposed to move. And I was just joking and laughing with him. And he's like, yeah, I know. That's why I didn't. And then I tried to muscle him. Ego. I'm like, well, if you're not going to do it the way that it's supposed to work, then I'm just going to muscle you.
Yeah.
Ego.
Yeah.
And I tried to muscle him. And I'm not sure if I heard or felt it just go, snap. Nope. That ain't going to work. And it hurt so bad. I got nauseous. I didn't throw up, but I got nauseous. And I'm like, that's a serious injury. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Ego, man. It's always ego.
I love it, man. That's good. I think we're good. You good? Let's just call this thing. That was great. Great stuff.
Fix it, guys.
All right, let's jump into some Instagram. Sound good? So to connect with Mr. Mickler on the socials, that's at Ryan Mickler. And we're fielding questions today from his Instagram account. First question, Gregory Gang, Ryan and Kip, what are you both most excited about right now? Not including the order of man, which I actually really appreciate that he's like, you can't include that because we already know that you're excited about it. So that that says something. So
yeah.
But what other thing are you most excited about?
I'm gonna do a little bit of rapid fire because I know we have a lot of great questions actually. So I'm gonna do rapid fire. There's two things I'm excited about right now. I'm actually excited about recovery. I'm halfway into the sling, so I'm 50% of the way through. I have started working out. I'm doing legs and working this other side of my body. I'm actually very, very excited about that. And I'm excited to get back to jujitsu, but it's going to be about 3 to 4 months. So that's number one. Number two, on a more personal, more immediate term level, I'm excited for my two oldest sons. They're at fishing camp right now. They're going to be gone for about 5 or 6 days. And we dropped them off yesterday and it was challenging, more so I think for my wife to drop them off. But the fact that my two oldest boys are there together, they're with camp counselors and they're doing their thing. I'm very excited for them. And there's actually one more thing. I drew out for a moose hunt in October. I drew out.
You got a tag. Nice.
Yeah, I got a tag. So this is our third year putting in. I have friends that have been putting in for literally 20 years and haven't drawn out. And we drew out after year 3. So me and my oldest son, Brecken, are going to go hunt in October for moose. So those are the 3 things I'm really excited about right now.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the main thing is we're breaking ground finally. So we got this old trailer off the property down off the water that's officially gone. And probably next week we'll be doing foundation. And then shortly after that, start framing a house. And I'm really excited about it. Mostly not for the house, actually. I'm excited because my wife's uncle is going to be the general contractor. And I plan to take as much time off and work like long days so I can have like long weekends and just go down there and focus on building a house, which I've never done before. And I'm actually
let him help you with it.
Exactly. I'm just super excited to be like, have a mentor and say, this is what we do and know that it's going to be done right versus if I try to do it, I know like the house would be leaning or something wrong. So to have someone that's an expert be able to coach and just be humble, listen and learn. I'm really excited about.
That's really cool. This will be a second home or a lake cabin versus your primary residence.
Exactly. Yeah.
They would call it a camp. Here in Maine, they would call it camp.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. A camp. Yeah. Like in Utah, it's like a cabin. And you're like, well, it's not a cabin. It's kind of just a house, right?
But it still is a cabin. But here they call it camp. I've got a camp.
Camp.
Yep.
Oh, interesting. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Boca09, Kip and Ryan, how do you manage your time and tasks when your children were younger? I have 4 kids underneath 8, including an infant. I find I am most productive early in the morning or late in the evenings when everyone is sleeping, but it's not sustainable. How can I better manage daily schedules while being present to help my wife and be there with my kids?
I think you hit it actually. And you also addressed it. It's not sustainable. You're right. It's not. And it's actually not meant to be. But here's the beautiful thing. Your kids get older. 4 under 8 is a challenge. No doubt. We've got, let me think here. Don't quote me on this, guys, or don't tell my wife, but 14, 11, almost 9, and 6. Those are our 4. And you're right. It's not sustainable, but it's not supposed to be. It's seasons. That's all it is. So look, I wish I can give you a better answer, but I think you stumbled upon it or deliberately done it. Maybe not stumbled upon it. Early mornings before everybody's awake and evenings after everybody's asleep. And the only other thing I would suggest to you, if you're not already doing it, sounds like you are, is to have boundaries in place. So you might need to communicate with your wife and your older children, maybe your 8 and 6-year-old, and say, hey guys, look, from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. is dad's time. So if you wake up at 6:30, you guys, go have some breakfast, maybe watch a cartoon, but this is dad's time. So you let me have my time. At 7 o'clock at night or whatever your thing is, hey kids, it's bedtime. Oh, can we stay up an extra 10 minutes? No. It's bedtime. Bedtime is at 7 or 7:30 or whatever your family dynamic is. I'm not going to tell you what to do, what time you should put your kids to bed. You can figure that out. I will say you shouldn't put them to get bed at 9 or 10 or midnight or whenever you go to bed. But our two youngest, so that's our 9 and 6-year-old, they go to bed between about 7:30. And then our two oldest go to bed between 8 and 8:30. Those are the times. Like, there's no guesswork. They're not confused about that. They're not wondering. Nope. These are the times, and these are the boundaries that we have in place. The other thing our family does is quiet time. Sometimes my wife gets very overwhelmed with homeschool and taking care of the kid and doing all these things. And so she institutes quiet time. And that might just mean 30 minutes. And everybody goes to their room and they close the door and they figure out something to do. Legos, Barbies, playing the guitar, listening to music, cleaning your room. I really don't care what it is at that point, but there's quiet time that's instituted. And these are boundaries that are healthy for not just parents, but also for kids, and very, very effective. Quiet time with a 2-year-old is probably not going to work other than a nap. And so what I would do is, if I had kids under the age of 8, is I would say, okay, well, our 2-year-old's going to bed at, 1 o'clock this afternoon for an hour. And so that's when quiet time is. Everybody else is going to go to their rooms while the baby takes a nap, and you're all going to take an hour or a half an hour or whatever. And that gives you some time to recharge, rejuvenate, maybe do some work, catch up on some emails, make some calls, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And it just takes reps to get there. You like, sometimes when you instigate some of this stuff initially, it's not going to work. Quiet time's a disaster. Kids are still, you know what I mean? But stick with it, get some consistency and have some discipline around it, and it'll work. You just need to get some initial reps in. That's a good thought I'd have.
Yeah. It doesn't work just because you say it should be this way.
Yeah. And you'll want to give up, right? You'll want to give up and go, this isn't working. They're not consistent. It takes consistency for it to become consistent, right? For the children.
And let's take again, just because we like jujitsu so much, let's take a jujitsu analogy. It's always interesting when you roll with a brand new white belt who's strong and athletic. And most guys who come to jujitsu usually are, right? They've done wrestling in the past, or they're athletic, they're football players, they're athletic. They wouldn't come to jujitsu if they didn't have some sort of previous experience with something, right? Something, right?
Yeah.
And so what do? They go 1,000 miles an hour and they can't do anything, and you just laugh because it's funny. Like, it's hilarious. And it's very ineffective. It's very inefficient, and it doesn't work. And then, but you did that, Kip, I bet.
Yeah, totally.
I did that. I still do that. Obviously, clearly, I still do that. And it doesn't work.
I still do it sometimes. Yeah.
You're right. And so you realize, oh, strength actually, like, I want to be strong, but that's not the primary factor in this game. And so you learn and you do reps, to your point, and then it becomes more effective and more efficient. And you're like, oh, that doesn't work. In theory, sweeping them makes sense, but the way I'm doing it doesn't. So let me do that a different way. In theory, getting the kids to go to bed on time is effective and efficient, but the way I'm trying to do it isn't working. So let's come up with a new scenario to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Matthew Hall, the first, should I quit? I left this question in. Yeah. Well, it says first on the end. So I thought I'll read that part. It's just
interesting.
You're going to beat this up, but I left it in here because there's some goodness in here.
I'm going to beat it up.
Yeah, for sure.
I would never love
this.
Never.
I know you so well. Like I literally got halfway through the sentence and I'm like, I already know. Okay. So should I quit my full-time job or start farming with my family and do what I actually enjoy, or take the safe and easy road with 8 hours a day and good benefits?
That's a dumb question.
I know, but here's the better part. How do I find the courage to take the leap?
That you just do. Like, you don't have to you don't have to find courage. Like, there's no courage to find. It's just take it in you. You just take it. It's already there. You already have it. You don't need to find it. You just need to act on it. You already know. Like, think about the verbiage that you use. Do I take the safe path? Do I farm with my family and find joy and happiness and fulfillment? Like, what a crazy question. So the real question is your second half, which is, how do I find the courage to do this? Let's forget about everything else you said, because you already know. And just like everybody who's listening, who's trying to come up with answers to these types of questions, guys, you already know. How do you find the courage? It doesn't need to be found. It already exists and resides within you. You just need to make the decision. Now, I don't want you to be reckless. I'm not telling you to be reckless, but maybe you need to come up with a 6-month game plan, right? Like, you're in a job that you don't enjoy. You know which direction you want to go. You can't quite do it now, but over 6 to 12 months, you could definitely position yourself with cattle, with livestock, with setting up the contracts with grocery stores that you're going to sell your produce to. There's things that you can do over the next 6 to 12 months. And so what I would suggest is not that you don't need to find the courage. You already have it. You just need to act on it, but that you have a roadmap for the next 52 weeks. Week 1, XYZ. Week 2, ABC. Week 3, and you come up with a 52-week strategy. And now it's not so much courageousness as it is just execution. I just got to do it. That's week 1. My wife and I already talked about it. And so you do those things and you're on track.
And I would encourage some first principle thinking here, where there's a lot of assumptions being made, right? Take it safe, easy road, good benefits. Okay, well, what makes that safe? Right. Like I'm only present to this because I worked for myself and I had employees, and I'd get this all the time, right? I'd get these employees that were like, well, Kip, coming to work for you with a small company is a risk. It's not as safe as if I worked for Intel or some large corporation. And I would argue that point until I was blue in the face. Really? You think you being a cog in a bigger system in a machine with less correlation between your hard work and success is safety? It's perceived safety. But I would argue anything that the direct outcome of your success is more tied to how you show up and how hard you work, that's probably safer, because that you are in control in. But if I work for some large corporation and I'm just a number and I can work amazingly hard and still get laid off, that's not safety. So get clear on what you think is safe, and is it really safe, and or good benefits, right? Like, you pay for those benefits, you know that, right? Like that's the other part that's super funny. People think like, oh, I work for a company and I get good benefits, like it's a perk. No, you pay for those. You don't think when you hire employees that the cost of the employee is not calculated into the benefits that we give them,
right?
And how much salary you get. Like, trust me, that trickles down. If we didn't give you benefits, we'd pay you more, right? So just get clear on the assumptions that you're making.
Kip, I agree with you in principle, but there's one change I would make to that. And I think it actually is safer, because we got to look at the metrics they're considering safe, which is income and stability, right? That's when they say safe. When somebody says safer, that's what they're saying: income and stability.
Yeah.
It actually is unequivocally safer today. Would you agree with that? Like 100%, it's safer today than like going into your boss and say, like, let's say you're my boss, Kip, and I said, Kip, I quit. And you're like, oh, okay, you're resigning. When's your last day? I'm like, yesterday afternoon. It was definitely safer. If your definition of safe is income, it's definitely safer today to keep that job.
Because it's known, is what you're saying, is like,
because I need to put food on the table today.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
It's not safer tomorrow. Actually, it's less safe tomorrow. Yeah. And then in 2 years, it's less safe. In 20 years, it's like, who knows? Like the pendulum is swung. In 20 years, you're much more likely, it's way safer to have started your own business and be in business for 20 years on your own than it is to be under the thumb of an organization. Yeah. So the longer we spread that timeline out, the less safe it is. So how do you mitigate that? By exactly what we just told you. Yeah. I just told you 12 months, give yourself a 12-month timeline, because today it's safer to keep your job, like unequivocally, without fail.
Well,
definitely
because it's
safe.
known to you as well. Like you know
Exactly.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. And you've planned your life around it. But in 12 months, that safety measure goes down. And that's why, if I could lift my arm, it's like, here's where you are right now, safe. Here's where you could be, entrepreneur. And then over time, it goes like this, and it actually crisscrosses.
Yeah.
So what
For
we're trying to
those,
do is get you to hear this inflection point as quickly as we possibly can, so that can switch.
yeah. Yeah, for those not watching on YouTube, just imagine a T-Rex, trying to illustrate something with
Hold
this,
on.
little arm.
Hold on. We're gonna do this right. So if you're on YouTube, you're gonna get this. So
Screen share.
Here you are right here. You're totally safe. Here's where you could be. It's totally a risk, right? Like, I'm gonna start my new business, and then over time, your risk with your current organization goes down. Your risk with your business actually goes up.
Well, not your risk with your business,
your safety with your business.
Yeah,
yep.
safety.
Sorry.
Yep.
So we're trying to get you to hear as effectively as possible. And what that means is that you have all of this time, right? I'm really good with graphs. You can see this. You have all of this time right here. So when you're like, well, what do I do? This is what matters. So when people say, let me stop sharing here. When people say to me, Ryan, how did you start Order of Man? That's how I did it. I took that time, go to YouTube and watch it. I took that because you need to see that chart. I took all of that little grayed out area and I made the most effective use of that. That's how I did that. And that meant that I needed, that's it. Yeah. And that means that, to the previous question about with kids, like the first 2 hours of the day were mine. The rest of the time, then a next hour or so was my family's, because we did breakfast and family scriptures. Then the next 8 hours was my businesses, because I committed to doing that. And then there was one break in between that was also mine, called lunch. And I used that time for that gray area. And then there was time that I gave to my family when I was done with work. And that was about an hour to 2 hours. And then there was 2 hours that was mine. It's what you do in the gray area that's going to make sure that you reach that inflection point as quick, that maybe inflection, I don't know if it's like fulcrum or whatever, at the right, as quickly as you possibly can.
Israel O, in the context of a relationship that was heading towards marriage and ended because of my own failures, lack of confidence, and emotional confusion, I've identified my issues and I am working on them aggressively. When the text is all messed up, I think he was like texting this. How do I show my ex now that I want us and I am better in a way that is confident and aggressive, but respectful and not needy? I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you repaired and took back your relationship.
I take issue with one of the things that he said. I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, something along the lines of him and his ex, or, they didn't do well. And it was partly stemmed from a lack of his confidence. I take issue with that. It wasn't an issue with your confidence. It was an issue with your integrity. Right? We already talked about that.
And that lack of integrity has hurt your confidence.
Yes. Yeah. So let's not attribute to the symptom, what we should be attributing to the problem.
Yeah.
Which is, you weren't in integrity. You committed to your wife, and I don't know why it is. I'm not going to make assumptions, but I know enough about other people's scenarios that I could say it could be a fidelity issue. It could be that she's lost faith in you because of your work ethic or your laziness, or you weren't bringing income to the table. Yes, it could be some things on her end. Sure, let's table that for now. But it wasn't a lack of confidence. It was a lack of integrity. You weren't doing even if it was to yourself, you didn't do what you committed to doing. Yeah. And that stemmed in a lack of confidence, which she saw, and she didn't see the confidence. She said, well, he's cheating on me. Well, he told me he was going to provide for me and the family, and he's out partying every night. Like, it's not a confidence issue. It's an integrity issue.
Really quick before you answer the rest of the question, I like this, Ryan, because I think when guys have a tendency to say, I have a lack of confidence, it's almost like it's in a box and it's like something that they have to deal with, but they didn't create. You know what I mean? Like they're a victim of it. And thus there's minimal action. It's like, oh, I got to fix this thing that's wrong with me, versus like, no, you created that. And this is how you created it. And it just gives way better context to address it. So
a lot of people will say, even if it's subconsciously, well, if only I had the confidence of Kip, then things would be fine. Well, you can have Kip's confidence. Like it isn't something that you just were born with. Like you've earned it. Well, I wish I was as confident or as sure of myself as Ryan is. And people have said that. They reached out. Hey, I just wish I could communicate better. I wish I was as sure in my positions as you were. Well, I earned that. It didn't just happen one day. So you can have that. And it isn't confidence, it's integrity.
Yeah. I love it.
So that's point number one. Point number two, you're doing it for the wrong reason. And that's why you're never going to win her back.
It's not the
way that you're doing it.
Yeah. Cause it's still going to come across needy.
It is needy.
Yeah.
It's 100% needy.
Yeah.
It's like you're on the African plains and you're a cheetah or a lion and you're trying to chase this thing around and you're trying to develop your skills, but you're really not. You're just kind of relying upon how it was. And maybe one day if you catch your prey, you'll be fine. And your prey or her are actively trying to avoid you because you're scary. You represent a threat.
Totally.
So stop fucking chasing her, man.
Yeah. And what's going to happen? And what's going to happen if the reason's wrong, right? You're going to bust your ass. And let's just see hypothetically you're successful. Okay. So you bust your ass. You do it for all the wrong reasons. You show up more powerfully to quote unquote win her back. And then once you have her, what? You're going to fall the wayside because you're never doing it for the right reason anyway. And then you slump right back into, being the guy that caused your relationship to fail. Because you're never doing it for you. You're never doing it for the right reason.
Let's riff on this analogy a little bit more. Let's say I'm a lion on the African plains and I want to catch that gazelle. And let's say I managed to do it. Why did I catch that gazelle? Because it was weaker than me. Yeah. It was slower, dumber, whatever than I was. Is that what you want out of your partner? That she's weaker than you? That she's not independent, that she cannot take care of herself, that she's not confident, that she's dumb, that she's weak? I don't want that in a partner. I want somebody who's strong, who's bold, who's independent, who's capable, and yet chooses to be with me. And if you're chasing women around, it's not going to happen. Yeah. Right. That's weak. I'm not interested in that because I will eat her up and I will spit her out. And that's not what I'm looking for in a long-term relationship. And I've been there. I've had women in my life, before I was married, that, it was fun and it was enjoyable and they were weak, but they were fun to spend time with. And that's it. And then I was done and I was like, okay, what's next? You go onto the Order of Man website and type in fix yourself first. That's the first thing I'd say. Fix yourself first, or fix your marriage by fixing yourself. Those are the two resources I would give you. You need to stop chasing her and you need to improve your own capabilities. So if you're that lion on that African prairie, stop chasing and get strong. Stop chasing and get sure. Start being smart. Exercise. Build up your pride or your band of brothers. Find some hobbies that you can engage in. Figure out a way to make more money. Learn how to communicate effectively. Learn how to harness and deal with your emotions. Go to church, get spiritual, find God or find some sort of higher power than yourself. Man, you start doing these things and all of a sudden the gazelle, the lovely, beautiful gazelle over there is like, what's going on over there? I'm kind of interested in what's happening over there. That's pretty enticing. And then you'll notice the women, the employers, the clients, the friends, the success, the acumen comes to you. You don't even need to chase. Yeah. It comes to you. It's a beautiful thing, but you got to do it for yourself, not for her. It's very hard to do, especially in the midst. You've been here, Kip, and I've been here. When you lose somebody that you love, and it's not just that, it just takes a bit of your own identity away. I prided myself on being a husband. And when my wife left during our separation, it was a personal indictment. It was not just the fact that I didn't have her in my life. It was a personal indictment against me.
You failed at this.
Yes. And so it's hard to say, okay, well, I got to fix that. It's way easier to say, oh, I got to fix her. You can't, and you shouldn't. She can only do that. And that's part of what I'm talking about in the new book is called the Masculinity Manifesto. When I did that little whiteboard thing, you probably, maybe some of you, cause I know you guys do this, you like look at other things and you're like, did he have any porn windows up or anything like that? And you look at my emails and you look at, which I did not have any porn sites up, but I had an email up. I saw it and it said the Masculinity Manifesto. That's the new book coming out this fall. I promise you, people will, especially now I say it. And in it, I talk about how to garner influence, authority, and credibility. And it has less to do with what you do for and to other people and more to do almost exclusively what you do for yourself that leads outwards.
That's great. New Life Farm NC. How do you think the modern day church is failing as it pertains to serving the needs of men?
I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Was that with you or Sean? I can't remember.
No, it must have been with Sean.
Must have been with Sean. I don't know. I'll say it this way. I don't know that that's a focus I would necessarily deal with. Like, oh, they're failing me. Okay, well, how? You decide, and then you figure out a solution.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's the church's. Let me think. I was going to say, here's what I was going to say. And this is not accurate. So, but here's what I don't think it's the church's responsibility to help men with this stuff. That's not accurate. I do, because I believe that their responsibility is to serve men and women to lead effectively and then to return to live with God. So that's not true. So I had to think about that for a second. I will say, I think we place too heavy of an emphasis on outside factors when we should do it ourselves. So what I would say to you is, well, here's what I would say about the church. The church really doesn't care too much about men and masculinity. It's an overly feminized approach. We're going to sit down, we're going to congregate, we're going to sing, and we're going to talk about these issues, and we're going to circle up, and we're going to share each other's problems. And there's a time and a place for that. But you know what doesn't happen in the church? Hey, you know what? We're going to go and we're going to punch each other in the face today, literally and figuratively. And before that, we're going to say a spiritual little message and a prayer. And then afterwards, we're going to pray together. That doesn't happen. Hey, you know what? We're going to go out and we're going to go to the shooting range and we're going to try to shoot targets that look like human beings. But before, we're going to say a prayer. God, give me the strength and the skill to protect myself and my family should the situation arise. That's what doesn't happen in the church. And that's what should happen in the church. If we're talking about Christianity, I talked about this before with you, Kip. Those 12 disciples were freaking men. They were fishers. They were dirty. They were disgusting. They were gross. They smelled bad. They were strong. They were capable. They were capitalists because they sold those fish on the market. They tried to get the best value from those fish. And they did their work. And when they were there, they were probably drinking. They were probably swearing at each other. They probably came to blows. I guarantee those disciples came to blows with each other. And when one of them said, I'm not going to do that, the other 11 said, no, you are going to do that because you're part of the tribe and you're going to hold your weight.
Yeah.
Come on now. Like, if we really think about what that situation was like, that's the reality, because we know how we as men would behave. And yet all of that was done in a righteous way, right? We're going to fight, and we're going to be strong, and we're going to make ourselves capable. And when one of us is down, we're going to lift the other one up. And you don't see that in church, but you could be that in the church. You could create that. You could go to your pastor, who I would almost be willing to bet is not this kind of man. And I would say, hey, Pastor Joe, I love your sermons. I love what you talk about. It enriches me. It helps me lead my family. And one way I would like to serve our congregation is that every Wednesday morning, I would like to do a physical activity with men. We're actually going to go train jujitsu. Would you be okay if I promoted that? The way that it's going to work is we're going to say a prayer in the morning and open it up to God. And then we're going to do a spiritual lesson. And then I'm going to tie that spiritual lesson into a lesson of jujitsu. And we're going to fight for an hour. And then we're going to cap it off with a prayer to God in the service of our neighbors and our family members. If that pastor says no, I'm out of that church. Like, yeah, see ya. I'm on to the next. But you could be the change that needs to be seen in these overly feminized church congregations. And by the way, when I say that, because we do have a lot of women listening, ladies, I'm not beating you up. I'm not mocking you when I say overly feminized. I'm saying it's catered to you, and that's beautiful, but it's just not catered to men as well.
Yeah. 22 Cheapster. In the context of marriage, how do you deal with a false, and I've never heard this term before until this question, how do you deal with false ownership coming from your spouse? How you do your best to strive and truly own your life, but they say things like, I know I'm a bitch, but at least I know it, so it's okay. I know this sounds like whining. There is truth to that. I feel like I'm hanging on to the greased rope for dear life. I struggle wrestling with my personal ownership daily. I can see in others and myself how I've changed for the positive, mostly myself. I also can clearly see the harm false ownership does to our children.
So false ownership, this, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, is this example where he said, his wife said, I know I'm a bitch, but it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's like this ownership of, I think it's the ownership of this is how I am. And like, and then stopping the thought there, right? It's like, well, this is just who I am, and not following that conclusion to, well, then maybe you should change you or whatever.
Right.
That's what I'm seeing.
The conversation I would have with my wife is I would say, no, that's not okay. And I'll tell you why, because when you act like that, it makes me feel like you don't want to be a contributing member to the family. When you act like that, the kids get upset, and it doesn't actually help lead them to a place that I know you really care about taking them. When you act like that, it makes me feel ... So you're not just like putting it all on her. You're just helping her to explain, because this is a leadership issue, and you do it too, just like I do it, just like you do it, Kip, right? Like, well, deal with it. Well, why does my wife have to deal with my attitude? She shouldn't have to deal with that. Like, you're telling me that the only way I can communicate is this one way, and I'm incapable of dealing and working with people in another way? We're human beings. Of course we are. So I really think you need to sit down and you need to say, hey, hon, like, you've said these things and you've communicated these things before, but I'm not totally sure you understand how your attitude is perceived by me and the kids. And I actually appreciate when you say I'm a bitch, so deal with it. You know what I appreciate? I appreciate that you're independent. I actually appreciate your conviction about your beliefs. I appreciate your strong will and your belief in X, Y, and Z. I really appreciate that. That's the part of this quote unquote bitchiness that I like, that should be celebrated and I honor. And then there's the other part that makes me feel like you aren't willing to be a team player, and that you aren't willing to lead with me in raising our children. And so I want to talk about that part. But in the meantime, maybe there's just some things that I'm doing on my end that I feel like are advantageous for the family, but you don't think they are. What can I do? Because look, if you're doing what you need to do, like, so here's a funny example. You don't really too often, occasionally, but too often, when you look at a husband and wife, like, look at their physiques. Their physiques are usually very similar, right? Like, look at you and Asia. Look at me and Trish. Like, look at the couple's physique. They're usually very, very similar. Occasionally you'll get some differences, but usually they're very, why? Yeah. Why is that the case? Because you guys are just feeding off of each other. So what if you decided to change the dynamic? Would she respond? Probably. She probably would, negatively or positively. If you decided to get off track and be a slob and do whatever, like, she would probably respond to that. If you decided, hey, I'm going to get on track and me and the kids are going to eat correctly, and we're going to get in shape, and we're going to start working out, you know what? I think she would be on board with that. I really do. That's why women and men so often look the same. Yeah. Even their animals look the same. Like, look at their animal. If they're fat and gross and overweight, their dogs are fat and gross and overweight. Isn't that wild? That's wild to me.
Yeah.
But you see a healthy family and the dog is lean and fit and strong and energetic. How? How can that be? We know why. So you need to start leading, man. You need to start leading.
Big Steve 12. Are you okay with this being our last question?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no problem.
Big Steve 12. How do you get better at listening to your own intuition and knowing the difference between my inner voice versus external noise?
I saw this question, and it's actually one of my favorite questions today, let alone forever. Like, this is, how do you get better at listening to your intuition? I'm a pretty intuitive person, personally, like just by design, by default. I'm like, no, that doesn't feel right. Don't do it. That feels right. Okay, go with it. Even when I was baptized, I'm like, I couldn't really give you a strong testimony other than I felt like it was good and right and period. So I've always been a pretty intuitive person by nature. Here's how you get better at it. You act on it, and then you evaluate it. So if your intuition is like, hey, you know what? You really should pursue this woman, then you should pursue that woman. Hey, you know what? You should quit your job and pursue this hobby. Do it. Like, to a degree. I'm not saying be reckless, but do it to a degree, and then have a system in place. This is important. Have a system in place for evaluating the decision. If you have this intuition of like, you know, I would really like to get into hunting, then you owe it to yourself. And from my perspective, God, because that's God placing these things into your ear or your soul, then you owe it to yourself and God to do it actually. And then you evaluate it. You're like, was that a good decision? Yeah, actually it was. Or no, it wasn't because of X, Y, and Z. Well, why? Oh, I didn't listen to this, but I did this. And I did listen to my intuition, but I got scared and I changed. Okay, well, so what do you ask yourself? Here's 5 simple questions that you can ask yourself. Because again, it's about acting on it and then evaluating it. So number 1, what did I accomplish? What did I get done? So my intuition said to do this thing. What did I accomplish? Number 2, what didn't I accomplish? My intuition said, follow this and pursue this. Did it work or no? Yes, this worked, but this did not. Number 3, what did I do well? During that pursuit of that intuition, what went well? Well, I was a great communicator. Well, I really enjoyed this facet of it. And then the 4th question is, what didn't I do so well? Well, I liked this, but I didn't like that. And so you start to discern between what went well and what didn't. And then the 5th question is, what do I do now? Now, what do I do? I've got all this information. I followed my intuition. I know what I got done. I know what I didn't get done. I know what I enjoyed about it. I know what I didn't enjoy about it. And so what do I do now? So let me give you a very tangible example. In 2014, I started a podcast called Wealth Anatomy. And my whole goal was to create some digital marketing in a way that really resonated with me inside of sectors outside of the financial space, which is what I was doing, the financial planning stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to start this podcast. This would be cool. And so if I was to respond to those questions, what did I get done? Well, I launched the podcast. What didn't I get done? Well, it wasn't as successful as I would have liked it to be. I did pick up some new clients, but it wasn't as successful as I liked it to be. 3rd question, what did I do well? Man, I was a really good podcaster from day one. Not that I didn't have room for improvement, but I know I really loved podcasting and I really enjoyed it. And I could ask thoughtful questions and I had the ability to connect with some cool people. What did I not do so well? Well, I really just didn't enjoy talking about finances. I had these conversations like, oh, I have to ask these people about investments in the stock market and saving money. And I don't like that. I'm going to leave that for Dave Ramsey. So what am I going to do now? Well, I liked podcasting, didn't like talking about money. I was pretty good at it. why don't I just do another podcast and we'll call it Order of Man? Now, this wasn't an overnight thing. This took several months, but why don't I start another podcast? And here we are, 2015, I launched Order of Man podcast. Here we are 7 years later, and it's one of the top podcasts in the world because of what I just told you. Intuition plus being willing to figure it out, and the feedback and evaluating it leads to better results. It always does.
Love it. All right, let's wrap up. I want to do a call out for Battle Ready. So as many of you guys know, we have the Iron Council. It's our exclusive brotherhood, and we open that up on a quarterly basis. It's closed as of now, so that will open back up in roughly about 2.5, 3 months. But until then, if you are interested in what we do in the Iron Council and you want to get on a path, and maybe even a path of kind of preparing to join us in the IC in a few months, we would highly recommend that you check out our Battle Ready program. You can go to orderofman.com/battle ready to sign up and do your own version of what it's like to be in the Iron Council in preparation. And that, I think, would really set up guys to be successful and help them kind of kickstart into joining us in a couple months.
We've never done it, but we should actually go in and do like a survey or something for how guys feel who joined the Iron Council, who did do the Battle Ready program and didn't do
not. It. Yeah.
We should let's you and I consider that. But
okay.
Anecdotally, I'd be willing to bet, and I'll put $100 on the line right now, whether that's to like a charity or something. Like I'll do $100 right now. I'll do $1,000. That's even better. I'll do $1,000 right now. That if the guys who go through Battle Ready don't feel subjectively more qualified than the guys who did, I'll just, I don't know, I'll give $1,000 to a chair. I'll do it anyways, but I'm just really curious about what that would look like.
Yeah, I bet you're right.
Yeah,
I bet you're right.
Orderman.com/battle ready. Check it out, guys.
Yep. And then connect with Mr. Mickler on the socials at Ryan Mickler. And then of course, band with us also on YouTube so you can see Ryan's attempt to draw.
Attempt, bro. You've never seen anything like.
Pretty good.
Don't tell me attempt. I know you're gonna steal that this afternoon for some of your consulting gigs.
Yeah, I'll be in a consulting and be like, well, this diagram I come up with.
Look at this thing I thought of. It's amazing.
Totally.
All right, guys. Great questions today. We'll keep them coming. You keep asking the questions, and we'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.